The little girl let out a sudden, piercing cry, her tiny fingers slipping to drop an expensive crystal necklace right into the bustling, crowded hotel lobby. She sprinted past one of the city's most prominent, wealthiest women as if a ghost had crossed her path, ignoring every maternal instinct in the room. Instead of running toward her mother, she flung herself headfirst into the comforting arms of a quiet stranger clad in a faded blue shirt. She whispered something urgent into his ear, and in a fraction of a second, every ounce of cool, polished confidence drained straight out of the billionaire's face. In a grand room buzzing with pristine smiles, powerful corporate executives, and meticulously rehearsed first impressions, the only soul who remained utterly serene was a former Navy SEAL who had nearly called off this entire blind date just hours earlier. If you truly believe that kindness has the power to mend shattered hearts, that forgiveness can breathe new life into broken families, and that second chances are always worth fighting for, take a moment to pause. Leave a heartfelt thought. Share this story with someone who needs a dose of encouragement today, and join our community so we can keep sharing reminders that genuine human compassion is still very much alive. Rowan Mercer had spent 12 grueling years serving as a Navy SEAL before life threw him into a battlefield that no amount of military drills or tactical training could ever prepare him for. After losing his beloved wife, Claire, to a relentless, aggressive illness, he returned home carrying invisible wounds far heavier and more agonizing than any combat gear he had ever hauled across foreign lands. His single greatest mission now was raising his 8-year-old son, Ellis, who had inherited his mother's tender heart and boundless curiosity. Every single morning kicked off with stacks of homemade pancakes, cheerful school drop-offs, and quiet, reassuring promises that no matter how rough the tides of life became, they would always weather them side by side. Rowan made his living as a wilderness survival instructor, deliberately choosing a tranquil career path that guaranteed he would never miss a school play, a messy science project, or a comforting bedtime chat. While well-meaning friends constantly insisted he deserved another shot at romance, Rowan quietly figured that his own chapter of love stories had already drawn to a close. Several states away, tech mogul and billionaire entrepreneur Celeste Whitmore had masterminded one of the fastest accelerating cybersecurity empires in the country. Glossy magazine covers routinely hailed her as fearless, brilliant, and completely unstoppable. Yet none of those glowing headlines ever captured the heavy, suffocating loneliness waiting for her inside her cavernous, empty mansion every afternoon. Her monumental success had demanded an astronomical toll. Endless high-stakes board meetings, exhausting international flights, and impossible expectations had slowly driven a wedge between her and her 10-year-old daughter Marin. The little girl was surrounded by every material luxury money could buy, yet she secretly longed for something that wealth could never hope to purchase. A mother with enough time to genuinely see her. Well-meaning friends eventually coaxed both Rowan and Celeste into accepting a carefully orchestrated blind date at a charity luncheon held for military families and children's education. Neither of them went in expecting anything profound to blossom. Rowan showed up mostly because Ellis kept pushing him to step out of the shadows and embrace happiness again, while Celeste agreed because her loyal, longtime assistant gently reminded her that even the most stellar career could never truly substitute for authentic human connection. The luncheon unfolded beneath warm afternoon rays streaming through towering glass windows that overlooked a peaceful waterfront. Everything felt meticulously planned and predictable until Marin unexpectedly showed up after wrapping up an art workshop nearby. She drifted through the elegant lobby, clutching a worn sketchbook tightly against her chest. The second her eyes locked onto Rowan, who was standing quietly near a display of children's artwork, the impossible happened. She froze, hot tears welled up in her eyes, and then she bolted straight toward him with absolute, unwavering trust. Everyone nearby assumed the child had made an embarrassing mix-up. She hadn't. Marin gripped Rowan's hand fiercely because months earlier, she had gotten separated from her school field trip during a chaotic, crowded daytime history festival. Panic had rippled rapidly through the teachers and parents until an off-duty Rowan calmly spotted the terrified little girl sitting all alone beneath the sprawling branches of an ancient oak tree. Instead of crowding her with overwhelming questions, he had knelt right down beside her, handed her a cool bottle of water, coached her through slow, steady breaths, and patiently stayed by her side until security safely reunited her with her family. That entire encounter had lasted less than 30 minutes. Yet Rowan's gentle decency had etched itself into Marin's young mind as one of her absolute brightest memories. She had never forgotten the stranger who met her sheer panic with dignity rather than frustration. Celeste stood frozen in total disbelief, suddenly realizing just how deeply that fleeting encounter had impacted her daughter. While Celeste had been chained to an urgent, high-pressure business meeting months ago, a total stranger had unknowingly become the exact pillar of comfort her daughter sought out whenever anxiety gripped her heart. Their blind date instantly morphed into something entirely unexpected. Instead of trading boring talk about investment portfolios or travel itineraries, Rowan turned his attention to Marin, asking her about the vivid, colorful landscapes bursting from the pages of her sketchbook. Every single page revealed breathtaking scenes of dense forests, glassy lakes, and majestic mountain ranges. She quietly confessed that she loved imagining peaceful hideaways because real life always felt too chaotic and loud. Rowan listened without ever cutting her off, intuitively reading the complex emotions that children so often struggle to put into words. Celeste watched quietly from across the table, hit with the sobering realization that while she could skillfully negotiate billion-dollar mergers, she had somehow forgotten how to truly listen to her own child. Over the ensuing weeks, they carved out moments to meet during sunlit afternoons in public parks, quiet museums, sprawling botanical gardens, and community volunteer drives. Rowan never once tried to dazzle Celeste with flashy, dramatic war stories from his time in the military. Instead, he let his quiet integrity shine through mundane, everyday actions. He pitched in to help elderly volunteers carry heavy supplies. He remembered the names of everyone he crossed paths with. He thanked restaurant servers with absolute sincerity. He guided Ellis and Marin to untangle their little disagreements through patience rather than fiery outbursts. His true strength wasn't measured by physical bravado, but by emotional steadiness. Ellis welcomed Marin into their small world like a lifelong friend right from day one. Together, they hammered together birdhouses, planted vibrant rows of flowers in neighborhood community plots, and volunteered their weekends at animal shelters. For the first time in years, genuine laughter echoed effortlessly through afternoons that had once felt achingly hollow for both households. Yet, true happiness rarely takes root without facing a bit of a storm. Members of Celeste's executive board began whispering doubts about her blossoming romance with an ordinary survival instructor. Financial journalists spun endless webs of speculation, hunting for hidden motives. Online gossip columns cruelly suggested that Rowan was simply chasing after her fortune. Paparazzi tracked them through city parks, desperate for a scandalous snapshot to fuel their next sensational headline. Rowan stonewalled every single interview request. His calm silence baffled the media, and his unshakable dignity frustrated them even more. Eventually, an aggressive reporter ambushed Rowan during a charity event, while children painted vibrant murals nearby. The reporter hinted broadly that veterans often hit hard financial times, slyly implying that Rowan had deliberately targeted one of the wealthiest women in the country. Instead of flaring up defensively, Rowan simply offered a warm smile, thanked the reporter for turning up to support the charity, and went right back to helping children plant saplings beneath the golden afternoon sun. The confrontation dissolved not because the malicious whispers vanished, but because Rowan simply refused to let bitterness drown out his compassion. Celeste witnessed the entire exchange. That quiet display taught her more about genuine character than months of high society chatter ever could. Meanwhile, Marin started hitting an emotional rough patch after classmates parroted cruel rumors overheard from adults. Gossip claiming Rowan only cared about money and would inevitably vanish just like everyone else. Those stinging remarks ripped open old insecurities she thought she had buried deep down ever since her parents' painful divorce years prior. Instead of meeting the situation with anger or lectures, Rowan invited both families on a leisurely weekend hike deep into a sweeping national park. Towering along the trail were ancient trees whose massive roots plunged deep into the earth beneath them. Rowan explained that fierce storms could easily bend branches and strip away leaves, but roots nourished patiently over decades always held firm. Trust, he explained softly, worked in the exact same fashion. Real families weren't forged by flashy headlines or outside opinions. They were built through unwavering honesty, daily consistency, quiet sacrifice, and love practiced in the smallest of moments. Those words settled like a calming balm into the hearts of both children. Weeks later, an unexpected crisis shook everything up once again. While heading back from a local community fundraiser on a bright afternoon, a tour bus suffered catastrophic brake failure on a steep incline near a bustling public square. Panic surged instantly as pedestrians scattered frantically in every direction looking for safety. Rowan's military instincts snapped into gear without a single moment of hesitation. He coordinated panicked bystanders, ushered children toward safe perimeters, and helped emergency crews clear the path before anyone could be trapped in harm's way. He never once looked for applause or a spotlight. Cameras happened to capture his bravery only because reporters covering the charity event were already stationed nearby, and the footage went viral across the globe within hours. Millions tuned in expecting glamorous interviews celebrating a hero's glory. Instead, Rowan urged every news outlet to shift their focus toward the real heroes. The emergency responders, local teachers, and ordinary citizens who had stepped up to protect lives that afternoon. He insisted that true courage belonged to anyone willing to look out for a stranger. Public sentiment flipped overnight. The very people who had once questioned his motives were now singing praises of his profound humility. Yet, the most profound transformation took place deep inside Celeste's heart. She finally grasped a fundamental truth. True greatness never screams for attention. It simply reveals itself through the quiet choices you make when no external reward is guaranteed. Driven to heal years of emotional distance, Celeste systematically overhauled her entire corporate structure. She delegated heavy workloads, cut down on unnecessary travel, and introduced progressive, family-first workplace policies that gave parents the freedom to attend school milestones without a shred of guilt. Initial shareholder panic over potential profit dips proved entirely unfounded. Employee loyalty skyrocketed to historic highs, productivity soared, and her firm earned national acclaim for treating families with genuine respect instead of hollow marketing slogans. Back at home, their afternoons underwent a miraculous metamorphosis. Business phone calls stopped hijacking dinner time. Sketchbooks and colored pencils permanently claimed the dining room table. Weekend volunteer shifts completely replaced superficial luxury shopping sprees. Marin flashed radiant smiles more often than anyone could remember, and Ellis finally stopped worrying that his dad would spend his twilight years alone once college finally called. On a brilliant spring afternoon, Rowan spearheaded a massive community picnic celebrating military families, teachers, frontline responders, and local volunteers. Hundreds gathered beneath a flawless blue sky, sharing homemade food, trading stories, and laughing freely without a single thought given to social status or corporate titles. Multi-millionaires sat shoulder to shoulder with blue-collar mechanics. Veterans tossed a baseball with neighborhood kids, while elderly couples drifted into slow dances on the grass to the tune of cheerful local musicians. Near the twilight of the celebration, Marin quietly slipped a fresh drawing into Celeste's hands. It depicted 4 figures standing side by side beneath the sweeping branches of a grand oak tree. There were no sleek sports cars, no towering glass office buildings, no medals and no luxury mansions. Just 2 adults and 2 children holding hands tightly under a warm sun, accompanied by a single sentence scrawled across the bottom in neat handwriting. The strongest families are built by people who choose each other every single day. Tears finally spilled from Celeste's eyes, free of any shame or reservation. For years, she had operated under the illusion that success meant building an empire so massive the world couldn't possibly forget her name. Her precious daughter had just opened her eyes to a far greater achievement, building a family whose love would never need a headline to prove its worth. Months later, against the breathtaking backdrop of the very same waterfront where their blind date had first kicked off, Rowan and Celeste gathered alongside Ellis, Marin, cherished friends, military families, and close neighbors. There were no extravagant displays of wealth, no A-list celebrity guests, and zero media circus. There were only deeply grateful hearts celebrating the quiet miracle of finding a profound new dawn after weathering a storm of heartbreak. Rowan had walked into that first blind date believing his future was restricted to merely surviving each day as it came. Celeste had arrived convinced that true success required sacrificing her personal happiness. Ellis had lived in constant dread of losing the joyful father he anchored his life to, while Marin had quietly wondered if adults were forever doomed to choose their careers over love. Together, they stumbled upon an entirely different truth. The deepest, most jagged wounds can transform into the strongest bridges the moment people choose compassion over pride. The most arduous journeys frequently guide us toward the families we never knew we needed. And sometimes, the person who completely rewrites the course of your life isn't the one you were frantically searching for, but the gentle soul who quietly reminds you that love isn't measured in grand gestures. It's measured in presence, patience, and everyday kindness.